All right, Shalom. Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rachak Wadash. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and the elders of Great Millstone, the men whom I've learned this truth from, and Shalom to the elect that's out there preaching His word in truth and sincerity. All right, so I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal. Back with another lesson, and this lesson that I'm going to be getting into today, it's going to be going into the importance of why, a woman should be married off, at a young age, right? And once again, to make mention and clarify that, this was a part of our custom, right? And a part of the laws that the Heavenly Father gave us, which also goes to show you that, what the Heavenly Father set up for us was for our welfare, for our well-being. Because when you actually take a look at the laws and statutes and commandments that He told us to follow, it's for our benefit, man. It's to better us as a people, right? And a part of that, the laws is marrying off your daughters at a young age, right? And there's countless of benefits of that, right? And I'm just going to touch on one of them, and that's going to be childbearing, right? Okay. Because when a woman is married off at a young age, she's most likely to bear children at a young age, right? And what I mean by a young age, I have to specify once again, is when a woman is eligible to have sexual intercourse, right? A young woman is eligible to have sexual intercourse, and there is an indicator for that to let you know that she's ready to basically consummate the marriage, right? For lack of better words. And that's when her period comes in or kicks in, right? Which in the scriptures is known as the flower of her age, right? So that's the indicator of when a woman is ready, to have sexual intercourse with a man, and once again, the age varies, but, the flower or her period usually comes in around when she's 12, 13, 14, around there, when they're young, right? When they're young. And that's the Heavenly Father for you, right? There's nothing you could do to disannul that fact, right? Because the period is a sign that the woman is ready to have children, right? And we understood this in the ancient world, right? But that has been lost today and age, but once again, the Lord gave us the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to get back to our roots, to get back to our ways. And this is a part of it, right? And something also to make mention is that, okay, we're not doing this, we're not going and looking for a 12 to 13 and 14-year-old woman in this society. That's not what we're doing at all, because of the laws of this society, the laws and customs of this society, right? We would be in trouble. You would get in trouble with law enforcement and the government, right? So this is not something that we promote. This is simply me bringing out information about our customs, our ancient world customs, and what's getting ready to come in the world to come, right? We don't do this in this current rulership and kingdom because it's not our world, right? It's not the Heavenly Father's world. This world is ruled by the prince of the power of the air, Esau Edom, the so-called white man. All right? So with that being said, you know. Um, where should I start? Matter of fact, yeah, let me start here with King David in the book of First Kings, chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, "Now King David was old and stricken in years, and they covered him with clothes, but he got no heat." Right, so this is when King David was up in age, and he was basically, his spirit was dimming, meaning he was ready to die, right? But let's see how they combat or try to slow down that process, right? To bring him back to life, Verse 2, it says, "Wherefore his servants said unto him, Let there be sought for my lord the king a young virgin, and let her stand before the king, and let her cherish him, and let her lie in thy bosom, that my lord the king may get heat." Right. And when you go into that word virgin here, a young virgin, once again, there's more than one word to that, or there's more than one definition to that word virgin. You have to filter out and input what the right context is for the right definition, right? And in this case, this word virgin will be Bathwala, right, in the Hebrew. Matter of fact, let's look it up real quick. Yeah, virgin. Yep. Here we go. Bathwala, right? Bathwala, which means an unspotted and untouched woman, right? So that's who they were looking for King David, unspotted and untouched woman, but she was ready. She was eligible to have children. Why? Because she already has had the flower of her age. She's prepared, but she had to be untouched. No man could have known her. No man could have had sex with her before, right? She was pure, unspotted, and that's what that word virgin means, right? So this was the type of woman they were looking for King David, and she must have probably been around 12, 13, 14 years old, right? Going to show you that they understood the concept of young woman, right? Bearing strong children as well, right? Why? Because take a look at King David. I believe that King David's mother was young as well when she begot him, right? Because take a look at the sort of man King David was. Though it doesn't specify how old she was, but in my speculation and my spiritual hypothesis, I come to the conclusion that King David's mother might have been young as well, right? Because young mothers tend to breed stronger children, right? In case of King David, which we know how mighty King David was. So verse 3, and something that I'm also going to get into in this lesson is parallels of today and age, examples of athletes today in 2025 that actually had young mothers, right, verse 3, "So they sought for a fair damsel throughout all the coast of Israel, and found Abishag, a Shumunite, and brought her to the king. And the damsel was very fair, and cherished the king, and ministered to him. But the king knew her not," right? So King David didn't go into her. I want to show you that he was ready to die. The spirit was really dimming, you know? All right, so since we got that out of the way, let's go from there to the book of yep, second. It's the book of Second Ezra 14 and verse 17, right? Because men like King David in that time, it was most likely common that, you know, they were birthed from young mothers, right? Which basically gave them more strength, you know, because of the condition and health that their mother was in, her youth, the strength of the youth, right? But today and age, that's something that rarely happens, right? You rarely have a woman that's pregnant as soon as she's ready to have children, which would be between 12, 13, and 14 years old sometimes, right? You would rarely have that today and age, right? So this second Ezra 14 and verse 17, it says, "For look how much the world shall be weaker through age, so the more shall evils increase upon them that dwell therein," right? So the earth as a whole has become weaker throughout age. Men have become weaker, right? Shorter, lesser of stature, right? And that's throughout time. Because when you go back into the ancient time, you had men that were mightier, like King David, and even before that, going back to the time of Genesis, when scriptures speak about the giants, right? And that term giants, right, in the Hebrew, I believe it goes back to the Nephilims, right? And I got that here, second Ezra, so like in Genesis 6 and verse 4, it says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of the Most High came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown," right? So these giants were what? Men that fell, right? Fell from what? From their glory, man. You know? The fallen ones, right? But the point I'm trying to make here is that you had men that were actual, or not actual giants, but they were giants. They were taller in stature, right? 6'8" was probably an average height back then. Why? Because the earth as a whole was in its strength during this time. It's not like the earth that we live in now, to where everything is basically decayed. You have concrete everywhere. The food is not at its strength. The water is polluted. The air we breathe is polluted. You didn't have this during that time to this extent. All right. So they most likely were higher in stature. And not only that, but in intellect and intelligence. Right? So let's go from there to the book of Salakia. Second Ezra 5 and verse 50. It says, "And I asked and said, Seeing thou hast now given me the way, I will proceed to speak before thee. For our mother, of whom thou hast told me that she is young, draweth not now nigh unto age." He answered and said, "Ask a woman that bears children, and she shall tell thee. Say unto her, Wherefore are not they whom thou hast now brought forth like those that were before, but less of stature? And she shall answer thee, They that be born in the strength of youth are of one fashion, And they that are born in the time of age when the womb filleth or otherwise, right? In other words, right, children that are born while their mother is young are of one fashion, they're of one like, meaning they might, they are mightier and stronger and more healthy than children who are born when their mother is in their 40s or 30s, late 30s, right? When the womb is already filling, it's already dimming, right? And that's why it's important for you to marry off your that's one of the reasons why it's important for you to marry off your daughter when she is young, so that she can have children when they're young, so that she can basically bring forth children that are healthy, man, and strong, right? And that would potentially grow up to do great things, you know? And I have a couple examples of that that I'm going to be getting into. Let me just read this last verse, verse 54. It says, "Consider thou therefore also how that ye are less of stature than those that were before you," right? So if we were to look at our forefathers, a comparison between us today and our forefathers, we'll be like, damn, that's a big difference. You know? Why? Because going into what I went into, right? That world in the time of Genesis was a complete different world than the one we live in today, because that world was a more healthier place, right? Because even early on in this chapter, the Lord is comparing this to the earth as well, right? How that the earth is in a better if when the earth is in a better condition, being ran properly, while the fruits and the land and everything is working for you, the environment is going to be good, the people are going to thrive, people are going to be strong and healthy, versus a chaotic earth and a disorderly earth like the one we live in now, which only kills the people, destroys the people, man, without the people even realizing it, right? Okay, so let's go to Chat GPT. And the question that I asked Chat GPT was that what athletes had young mothers when they were born, right? And it says that's an interesting question. There are actually quite a few famous athletes who were born to young mothers. Here are a few notable examples, right? And this makes sense that these athletes were famous and notable, right? Because what made them famous and notable is the fact that they were born in the strength of what? In the strength of youth, right? Because their mothers were young when they had them, right? And a notable example, LeBron James, right? Serena and Venus Williams, right? Which LeBron James' mother was 16 years old when she gave birth to him, right? It says Serena and Venus Williams, their mother, or Jeannie Price, was relatively young when she started her family, though she was in her early 20s, not a teenager, right? Early 20s, right? And these are all Israelites as well, right? Lionel Messi. And this also reminds me of the precept in the book of Corinthians. Matter of fact, let me get that. Let's see. Yeah, so like your Romans 2 and verse 14, it says, when the Gentiles which have not the law, and this Gentile is referring to Israelite that fell away, right? Israelites or unnatural Gentiles, right? Israelites that called themselves Gentiles, but were actually Israelites, you know? Israelites that fell away from their heritage, right? So this is speaking about Israelites. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves. Because what's a part of the law? A part of the law is that it's okay for you to have sex with a woman that's ready to have sex, that's already had the flower of her age, you know, or in other words, a young woman, right? And that's the case with LeBron James' mother. She was 16, right? Shaquille O'Neal's mother as well. She was pretty young. I believe she was 17, you know? Here we go. So a couple more examples. Lionel Messi, Israelite, right? His mother was what? Around 20 years old. Kevin Durant, 21 years old. Cristiano Ronaldo, his mother was around 20 years old when she birthed him. Floyd Mayweather Jr., his mother was in the late teens, right? Allen Iverson, his mother was 15. Odell Beckham Jr., his mother was 20. Shaun White, Olympic snowboarder, his mother was around 19 years old. Lamar Jackson, an NFL MVP winner and a Heisman Trophy winner. His mother was around 19, right? Derrick Rose, his mother was barely 20. She was pretty young, so she was a teen still. Let's see, Mike Tyson, right? His mother was around 16. Bo Jackson, his mother was around her teenage years. Magic Johnson, his mother was 17 years old, right? So going to show you that the scriptures are on point and undefeated once again. You know, the law, statutes, and commandments are undefeated, right? Because those names that are mentioned are famous and notable people. But what contributed to their nobility is, first and foremost, they're children of the Most High, but also the strength of youth, right? Hey, so I hope this lesson was edifying. And the strength of youth meaning what? That they were born to young mothers. You know? So I hope this lesson was edifying to the elect. I want to say call hello, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, Ba'ashim Hakodash. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles and elders, the great millstone, the men that taught me this truth. Shalom to the elect.